Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Conversations with Asha and Steve. I am Steve Hart.
I don't know what your name is, but okay, go ahead.
Jeez, it's gonna be one of those shows I can see.
Welcome to Conversations with Asha and Steve, where communication matters. Join us as we discuss effective ways to communicate, bridge the gaps, and build long-lasting relationships within your business and life. Here are your hosts, Asha Prasad and Steve Harper.
Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Asha and Steve. I'm Steve Harper, and with me as always is my co-host, Dr. Asha Prasad. Asha, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Steve. How's it going over there?
Apparently, your day's going better than my day. I couldn't even
I
remember
don't
my
know.
name. We're off to an auspicious start to the show, right?
Interesting. Maybe it's time to change your name. I don't know.
I guess maybe I don't know. I just made up a word when anyway. Hey, so we are talking today about and continuing this series on struggle, and this actually was something that was put forward by a listener, and I'm really
Okay.
interested in your perspective on this. But the question was, you know, romantic relationships, what to do when you're struggling in a romantic
Mhm.
relationship, and that is sort of the mindset and kind of the approach that they kind of came to the table with. This person has
Okay.
been married for a number of years and they feel like right now their relationship is a lot of work. And they
Right.
are curious about what our thoughts are on how to overcome that struggle, how to get
hmm
things back on track, and maybe how to breathe new life into that relationship. So, what do you think?
Well, well, you know what, Steve? I mean, the thing is that are they feeling like it's a lot of work that they're just doing, like a one-sided kind of deal? Is that kind of did you get a feel of where they were coming from in that
Yeah,
perspective?
well, a little bit of insight. They're both very hard charging entrepreneurs. They're both growing
hmm
their own businesses, so they have their own priorities. And this particular person indicated that they sort of feel like they're going in two different directions, right? And sort of when they do get together, their big struggle is to find things other than work to really connect and talk about. That's number one. Number two is kind of the spark has sort of left the building.
Yeah.
And so there's really two issues going on, right? The attention piece is one, but then the how do you kind of reconnect and rekindle what you once
Yeah.
had, even though you've got all these distractions that are, always requiring your time and energy and attention.
I mean, I think it's just like, I mean, with anything, even as much as we pay attention to our businesses, we've got to, I don't want to say we treat our relationships like a business. I don't want to say that, but we've got to put the same, that's
What kind of
really funny.
relationships are you in? I don't. And are you
Apparently,
profitable? That's what I want to know. Are you?
I'm very profitable in that area.
Wow, this show just took a weird turn.
This took a very strange turn,
I'm
very fast.
glad I'm drinking a Monster. I'm going to need the energy for this one.
No, but it's like you have to, first of all, it's really important, especially as entrepreneurs, you got to find things in common, new, hobbies or things that you both find interesting and go out there and do it and make time for it because otherwise you will find yourself only talking about business, whether it's, your own or the other business, and then your life becomes only about that and you have nothing else in common. You have nothing else to talk about and then that gets really, I can see why the spark would really fizzle very quickly in that
Yeah,
in that scenario, right? So
absolutely.
with the same thing, I mean, you've got to find something. Maybe it's time to have a talk and say, "Hey, you know what? What are we doing for fun? What are the things that we can do together? Maybe we go and learn something together, or maybe we go take a class, or whatever
Yeah,
it is that you need to do." I think that that's really important because you've got to be able. Also, I think another thing, Steve, I'd like to say about that is I think two people need to stay individuals, but not so
yeah,
much that they end up on their own islands.
yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean by that? I don't know what you think about that.
No, I think it's important. You keep that individuality, right? So there are things that
Mhm.
you can do to, that you enjoy as an individual, spending time and investing your attention outside of work. I think that's
Yeah,
critical. But you also have to provide the freedom and space for your partner to do the same. And,
yeah,
maybe those things are somewhat compatible, maybe they're not. But at the end of the day, I think that, it's interesting because I think, and we've talked about this on prior episodes, there's really kind of
Hmm.
like a three-legged stool to the entrepreneur, right? You have your
Yeah.
work life, you have your personal life, but then you have your individual life. And those things
Mhm.
are not mutually exclusive. There's obviously some, bleeding into, each
Mhm.
lane for, any entrepreneur. But I think
Right.
it is important that you are not doing things that are so separate and so isolated from your partner
Yeah.
that even just bringing it up or just knowing that you're going to do this on a Saturday as opposed to spending
Hmm.
time with your partner, that could create conflict, right? Because at the end of the day, some
Yeah.
of those things create those resentments, and those resentments end up becoming unresolved. They become, points of contention and arguing, and
Yes.
that doesn't have a lot of value either. And so, to your point, like, hey, if we're gonna go do our individual thing on Saturday,
Mhm.
why don't we leave the mornings for that, and then in the afternoon we sync back up and have lunch, or we go on a hike, or we do
Exactly.
something that requires us to sort of be through an activity or spend time together.
Yeah.
That requires planning, and it requires, like you said,
Right.
that conversation needs to happen. And so this particular individual, who I know has the biggest heart and is a really good
Hmm.
individual, but they are a little bit selfish in, how they
Yeah.
spend their time. They'd be the first to admit it. And they are, sort of not looking at their partner's business and sort of the challenges that they're facing on their end nearly as equally as theirs. And that
Right.
also can cause conflict and problem. And so, to a certain degree, it's kind of like we all do this, right? We always have this natural tendency to think our problems are so much worse than somebody else's problems. Like,
That's so
oh yeah,
true.
Asha, yeah, you're complaining about that, but let me tell you, I got something worse. And that's part of the problem, is that when they
Yeah.
come home or they're together, they start unloading on what their mutual frustrations
Yeah.
are for their business, and they're not looking or treating each situation on an equal footing or equal level, which means that
Exactly.
one partner inevitably is going to feel dismissed or isolated, and that's a problem.
That's a really big problem. And I think, you know what, it's very useful to even plan, and you have to plan it, you have to schedule it. Plan a time once a week or even twice a week if you need to, where the two of you talk business. And I mean,
Yeah,
make that meeting like in the office or whatever it is. And just so that way you guys can come together and share, like, hey, this is what's going on in my business. Do you have any input? Do you have any ideas? Or, this is what I've been dealing with. And then vice versa. Because I think what happens there, then that is satisfied. You're able to share that aspect of it and maybe even learn from one another,
yeah,
and really be able to see. I mean, even if you're not having the same kind of business, I mean, business is business. There are certain things,
yep.
certain practices and principles that go across the board with any kind of business form. So, I think that that's very useful and very important too. That way, you can, just like you're scheduling your time to go, go do something together, do that as well. If that becomes, because I can imagine, as two entrepreneurs coming home, yeah, that's really, you just want to kind of vent about only that.
Yeah.
I would say schedule it in and be like, okay, these are the times that we're going to be talking about it. If there's anything, any emergency stuff that comes up during the week that we really, really have to talk about, okay, fine. But this is
But
our
that's the
dedicated
exception,
time.
not the rule. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, actually, if you treated it, I didn't think about this until you actually just shared that, but
Mhm.
actually creating this as your own internal mastermind, where we're coming to
Exactly.
this, where we're going to actually have a designated day or two
Yeah.
per month where we actually go offsite, have coffee, have lunch, and we only
Right.
talk business, and each of us gets 30 minutes, right? So you come
Yeah.
prepared, with whatever frustrations, whatever issues, whatever things that you could use somebody else's input, and
Exactly.
put it on the table. Like, for this particular couple, I know it would be a
Mhm.
huge value, because now you would be actually coming to the table saying to your partner, hey, I really could use your guidance and your advice, and I
Exactly.
really would like your input on these things. And then I'm going to create an open space for you to do the same. And if you actually literally gave 30 minutes to each partner, now we all feel like we shared, we all feel like we were heard, and we all had
Exactly.
an opportunity to share our input and our thoughts. And we have a place at the table where we can be seen and heard, which I think is really critical. So I think that's a
Yeah.
really brilliant point that you just made.
I mean, I think it's one of those things that we overlook. We kind of tend to think about in our romantic relationships that they're only supposed to be romantic relationships. And I mean,
Yeah.
but that's, I look at that and I think that is just not realistic. I mean,
No.
if you are with, I mean, it's if you're with somebody, you're with all of them. And that means that you guys are friends with each other, you guys are, best buddies. You're like all of it. And so
Yeah.
what would you do with a friend? You would sit down, you'd be like, "Hey, I need to talk about some things." You would do the same exact thing. And I think it really strengthens a relationship in
Yeah.
so many ways because then everybody feels heard, everybody feels valued. If one
Yeah.
person has a tendency to think that their business is more important than the other one, well, then no. This
This
is like
problem.
putting it on
Yeah.
equal footing
Yeah.
to say, okay, we're here to talk about your business as well. And, this is what we're going to do. I think it's really helpful.
Well, and I
And,
think,
yeah,
yeah, well, I was going to say, I think for the business component, that's absolutely critical and important. But
right,
then you have to like have that dividing line where, look, no more talk, no more shop talk on your end
exactly.
or my end, because I think really romantic relationships right now, especially when we're in such a distracted kind of
Mhm.
economy that we are in,
Yeah,
they require more special attention now than ever, right? Because
yeah.
I actually asked this person, I said, let me ask you a question, because I see that you post a lot on Facebook.
Mhm,
I see that you're online on LinkedIn. How much time and energy do you put towards those social networks? And just
mhm.
curious, right? So I got
Right.
her to respond to that, and it's quite a lot. And I said, but just curious, when do you do you wake up and immediately reach for your phone first, or do you reach for your partner? And
Yeah,
she was like, oh, I never really thought about that. She's like, my first inclination before I ever get out of bed is to check my email or to see if
exactly.
anything got posted on social that was of interest. And I'm like, that's the problem with a lot of romantic relationships. When
Yeah.
you're putting your energies and your efforts towards those things, which are, let's face it, complete distractions, as opposed to
Yes.
the person who's just right next to you, or that they feel that, they sense it, and it becomes
Yep.
a problem, and it actually says to the other person, well, that's more of a priority than I am.
Yes, it does. I mean, it communicates that in so many ways. It's so important. The small things, the little things that are done,
Yep.
the actions that we take, the time that we will take, putting that phone away and just like not even knowing where it is half the time is really a big gift for your relationship to really rekindle that spark with your loved one. I mean,
I Yeah.
it's yeah, it's huge. It's huge.
Well, I had to give you credit because you're the one that had indicated that it's really important to take that device and not put it on your bedstand or, your
Yeah,
dresser. Put it like in the bathroom or, downstairs or, in the kitchen
exactly.
or wherever. Right. And now you're not tempted to do that first. And,
Right.
not to say that you have to, reach over and, automatically, engage your partner, but just having that opportunity to say, good morning, what do you got going on today? Or just starting that
Exactly.
casual conversation,
Yeah.
or just, easing into the morning a little bit more um, collaboratively in some
Yeah.
capacity, I think can have a really big impact. And, I think the people that I see struggle the most, including this person, but I've seen a lot of my coaching clients struggle with this as
Mhm.
well, is they're putting their emphasis on all the wrong things. And they have to go
Yeah,
back to what is important about that relationship. Where do they want that relationship to go? How do they
exactly.
want it to grow? And what are they willing to step up to the plate to do? And I think those are things that are
Mhm.
really critical for our audience to consider, because it's a two-way street. But as we all
Yeah,
know, that sometimes it requires that we embrace and understand that we have to do the majority of the heavy lifting. And when we do it,
yeah.
and it doesn't feel like it's being forced, or it doesn't feel like you're playing a mind game with your partner, then it's often reciprocated, and it's often comes back to you in results in ways that you can't imagine.
It definitely does, and I mean, you know what, Steve, that's the thing, because people feel that. We sense things even when things
Yeah.
aren't outwardly spoken, we feel these things, and we know when people are really being genuine and when there are partners paying attention to us, true attention to us, or kind of, kind of half there, half not,
Yep. Like,
kind of spaced out, like, woohoo, so it's
oh, hey, Asha, what? Yeah, I was listening the whole time. Yes, yes,
So, I mean,
that's very
it
true.
is. It's really important, and I think that, and maybe you have a day in a week where you're like, okay, we're gonna, wake up together, we're gonna have breakfast together, we're gonna, and just really make it special, really plan these things in. And I know, like what you were saying, Steve, especially in nowadays, it's so important to get rid of the distractions. Really,
Yeah.
really important.
Well, and I actually have a couple that I know that has been married a very long time. And I
Mm-hmm.
asked my friend one time, I said, how did you guys make this work? Like, both
Right.
very hard charging business executives. They don't run, don't run their own companies, but they're pretty high up, high level
Right.
executives. There's a fair amount of travel that one of them does. There's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things that I think could take their relationship,
Mm-hmm.
you know, take that joy and that spark away just because of the fact that they
Right.
do and sometimes seem to be kind of like ships passing in the night. And he says, I'll
Exactly.
tell you what our secret has been. We got a relationship coach. They started off
Right.
actually in marriage counseling, not because they felt like they needed it. They wanted to preemptively
Yeah.
head off some of the issues that they knew that their hard charging lifestyles would actually create. And they
Mm-hmm.
knew that they didn't have the answers. So they needed to go to somebody who did. And
Right.
eventually that morphed into more of a relationship coaching relationship as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to going to a marriage counselor, someone that
Right.
really focuses on reminding you of the important things and collectively being able to talk about, some of the issues. And he said, the greatest thing is they spend part of their time because they have the flexibility for what they do. They spend part of their time
Mm-hmm.
here in Austin, but then they spend part of their time in Colorado over the summer to
Right.
kind of escape the heat. And
Awesome.
they found a great relationship coach that sort of follows them, not physically, because that'd be weird, but
That would be, that would
it's
be
like,
really weird,
yeah,
Steve.
they must be doing really well because instead of having like an au pair, they actually have their own
They
relationship
have
coach that it's kind of like Alice from the Brady Bunch, I guess, just goes with them. I don't know. But they said, really, when in those month spans when they're not here, they have
Mm-hmm.
Zoom calls together collectively. So
Yeah.
they've been able to do the face to face,
Okay.
sessions. And it's just great because when things are going really well, it's
Mm-hmm.
something like it just compounds that really good
Yeah.
stuff because now you've got somebody pointing those things out and sort of, you know,
Exactly.
pulling those things out of both of you. And when things are starting to get a little bit off track, you got somebody that's kind of bumping you back on track and
Yeah.
keeping things moving forward. And he had mentioned at one time, he said, one of the great things was I kept doing something that annoyed my wife and I did not know I was doing it until it
Right.
came up. And in the grand scheme of things, it was a pretty minor thing, but a minor thing done over, a series of days and weeks and months and years really
Right.
begins to be a problem. And he said, I could see this one thing leading to unraveling everything in our relationship, ball of
Exactly.
yarn. And I would not have even known it or understood it. But had she
Mm-hmm.
raised it directly to me, it would have been a fight.
Yeah.
However, how it was raised in this, the
Yeah.
confines of this secure kind of coaching relationship, they were able to talk about it. They were able to put it on the table and he was able to look at it and see it from a different alternative perspective. And he couldn't be angry about it. And he couldn't get,
Right.
he couldn't argue it because that they have rules for this engagement. And then he realized, yeah, I do that. And if the shoe was on the other foot, it would annoy me too. And so he was able to correct
Yeah.
course and, but that was part of the value. Now, not everybody has that luxury. Not everybody has that flexibility, but sometimes just even engaging, even in a short term, to
Mm-hmm.
get the relationship back on track, I think can be really valuable.
I think so too. I mean, I think getting a different point of view, an outside point of view in any situation really helps because we are going to know what we know, but we don't know what we don't know. What we can't really see. We have these blind spots,
Yeah.
and people can reflect that. A third party can reflect that. I can definitely see how that was very helpful. How interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of many people that have had an actual relationship coach. Usually you hear people going to counseling and that kind of thing, but a relationship coach, that makes sense though. Totally makes
Well,
sense.
it's funny because you hear about marriage counseling or you hear about
Yep.
these different efforts, and they're often raised at the end of the relationship, like when it's about
Exactly.
to completely be
Yeah.
unfixable. And by that point, there's so much tension and resentment that's created. I just thought his strategy was brilliant because he said
Yeah.
there will be times in our life, years that we go through challenges that the world throws at us, and
Mm-hmm.
nobody gives you a handbook for this stuff. And sometimes you get too comfortable trying to navigate your way through those things that you
Yep.
often have and fail to understand how your other partner is responding or reacting to how you act or what you do or how you deal with stress or certain circumstances that bubble up. And in their case, it's a very high stress, hard charging career path.
Right.
So they had to navigate those waters about travel. They had to navigate those waters about how we're going to deal with the kids. We're going to, figure out these issues along the way. And now,
Mm-hmm.
they're back to being empty nesters, and now they're doing it. And he says, it's an investment that we make in one another, and we show up with our authentic selves because
Mm-hmm.
we are both committed to being our authentic
Exactly.
selves with each other. So I just thought that was really a cool strategy.
I think that that's a great strategy, and it is true. I mean, there has to be an agreement, that commitment with each other. I mean, it's just so much more than just marriage. That's one thing, but you have to commit to what. How are we going to be with each other? What
Yeah.
are we? What do we want? How do we want ourselves to grow together? Where do we see? I mean, do we see ourselves as a team or not? Because I mean, I have seen coaching clients, especially, and even some friends of mine, personal friends of mine, that they weren't on the same page with that.
Yeah.
And if you know that, if you're communicating and you can verbalize that, then you have to make different decisions at that point. Because
Yeah.
if you're not coming to the same things, it's kind of like, okay, then we have to go to the drawing board. What do we want?
Well,
And I
and,
think it's
and
yeah,
to your point, right? It's almost kind of like your individual islands that you talked about, right?
yeah,
If they're too far apart, just
yes,
like,
exactly.
with our hobbies or our interests, but in our where we want our lives to be, that
Yes,
then, the delta between one island and the other becomes an ocean, and that
exactly.
ocean creates tremendous amount of resentment or uncertainty or fear of loss and failure and
Yep,
all those things. And the more that you can communicate, this is what I need in my life right now and what I want to do,
yep,
and here's where you fit within that, I think is a really good place to start.
yep,
And if you start with replacing every conversation with I as opposed to us or we, that communication piece makes a huge difference, because it's like, look, I'm working hard not because I want to be successful. I would like us to be successful. I'd like to have the,
exactly.
the financial, flexibility to travel when we decide we want to,
Right,
or to, like
exactly.
in my, case of my friends, I want us to be able to, to spend the summers in Colorado or, in another
Right,
state, or have these flexibilities, not because I'm trying to check a box for myself, but because I'm trying to check a box for, us as a couple. And I think it's
exactly.
really powerful for you to say, because if you put that out there and and all of a sudden your partner says, well, look, I don't want to travel, or I don't want to do these things. Okay,
Right,
well, what would you want to do? What
exactly.
could we do collectively together? And that just opens up all sorts of opportunity for dialogue. And if you have someone that's guiding that conversation that is very impartial to the outcome,
Hmm.
their only investment, or their only interest in the outcome is really the investment in having a positive forward relationship where you both feel mutually heard, and
Right.
and you benefit from continued growth. Then that becomes the perfect environment or situation for you.
That definitely does, because I think a lot of times, Steve, people find it hard to communicate authentically and genuinely and feel safe about it,
Yeah.
because sometimes there's so much we're so much in defense mode
Yep.
in our daily lives. I mean, just stop and think about that for a moment. I mean, think about how much we feel like we need to be in defense mode. And if we take that defense mode and take it to our personal relationships, yeah, I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster. Those are some, yeah,
Yeah.
heated discussions. And
Well,
it's not
we could do a whole
necessary.
nother episode just on that right there. I mean,
Exactly. So I mean, and I think definitely having that neutral ground, having that ability to be able to share openly and authentically is very important.
agreed. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I think we could carry this episode on a long time because there's so much there. But,
Yeah.
hopefully for the person that raised this, hopefully we gave you some good thoughts, and potential strategies to maybe, get this on sort of the right path. And if not, reach out to us. And Asha and
Definitely.
I'll set up and jump on a call, set up a time and jump on a call with you
Yeah.
to maybe talk through this. But it's something that I think you have to prioritize. And I think that if that
Yeah.
relationship is worth fighting for, then you have to be willing to step up to the plate, own your part in this situation. And just
Absolutely.
like you have to own it if it's going awry, you also have to own your part of the solution and what you bring to the table. So
Yeah.
I know
It's
Asha and
true.
I would be very happy to, guide and direct you if we can in any capacity to, if you feel like you still want to talk or expand upon this, we'd be happy to do it offline with you. So Asha, but for our
Absolutely.
other listeners, we're still carrying forward with, the topic of struggle.
Hmm.
How do people let us know what they thought of this episode? Other topics that they may be, or areas of their life they may be struggling with? How do they let us know what those are so that we can continue these
Yeah.
conversations and continue to add value to people's lives?
So definitely people can reach out to us on our website, conversationwithashaandsteve.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, drop a link, drop a comment or a question or anything like that below the video, wherever you're catching us. If you're catching us on the podcast, head over to our social media and reach out to us there. We'd love
Yep.
to hear from you and definitely take your comments. And even if you have questions that you want us to cover, put them there. We'll be happy to
Absolutely. And
discuss.
if you are catching this on a podcast platform, be sure to look at that platform and make sure it's got some notifications. So every time we post a new episode, you're going to get notified because we know you
Yeah.
do not want to miss a minute of conversations with Asha and Steve. This
Yeah.
is, we're talking about some really important things that can affect a lot of people in a lot of different areas of their life. And we are honored that you choose to, spend this time with us. And we really want to make sure that you are notified when those episodes go up.
Yeah.
And like Asha said, find us on Facebook so you can become part of that community. And then our YouTube channel, we would
Definitely.
love for you to subscribe and turn on that notification bell as well so that you're aware when you want to watch the videos and see Dr. Asha's beautiful face and, the opportunity to hear us talk as opposed to just hear us in your ear pods or whatever. So, all right. Well, Asha, this was a great episode. I'm glad we covered
Great.
this. I'm glad it got posed because it was a
Definitely
fun
great
topic
question.
of struggle for us to tackle. So I will look forward to seeing you in our next episode.
Sounds good, Steve. Till next
Take,
time.
all right. Till next time. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Conversations with Asha and Steve. We love to hear feedback and questions from our listeners. Please feel free to visit our Facebook page for more tips and information. You can also email us directly at info@ripplecentral.com for more information.